Amai stood quietly in the corner of the party hall. It was her parents' anniversary, and the place was full of music, laughter, and people dressed in fancy clothes. But Amai didn't feel like she belonged there. She wore a plain dress, held a small old clutch bag, and smiled softly to herself, hoping no one would notice her too much. Her heart felt heavy, but she tried not to show it. Earlier that evening, as they were getting ready, her mother had leaned close and whispered sharply, "Don't embarrass us today." Amai didn't answer. She had heard those words many times before. As the evening went on, guests came and went, chatting with her parents and siblings. No one really noticed Amai. She stood still, like furniture in the background. She wasn't loud or stylish like her sisters, and she didn't crack jokes like her brother. She was quiet, shy, and always seemed out of place at family events. She listened more than she spoke, and sometimes that made people forget she was even there. Then came a moment that made everything worse. A woman, holding a drink and laughing with Amai's parents, looked across the room and asked, "Who's that standing there?" Amai's father turned to look, then chuckled and said loud enough for a few others to hear, "Oh, that's just Amai, our shy little disappointment." The words hit her like a slap. People around laughed politely, thinking it was just a joke, but Amai felt like the floor had been pulled from under her. She didn't cry. She just stood there, frozen, her eyes blinking slowly, as if trying to push the tears back. It wasn't the first time they had said something like that, but hearing it in front of others, at a party where she had only come to support her family, felt different. It stung in a deeper place, but she didn't walk out. She didn't speak back. She just took a deep breath, fixed her smile, and stayed in her corner. Because Amai had learned something. Being quiet didn't mean being weak, and one day they'd all understand that, just not tonight. From a very young age, Amai felt like she didn't fit in her own home. It was like she was invisible. Her siblings were loud, cheerful, and full of energy. They danced to music in the living room, made funny videos for social media, and always knew how to grab attention. Everyone loved having them around. They made people laugh, they smiled at the camera, and they always knew what to say. But Amai was different. She liked to sit quietly in a corner with a book. She asked questions that made people uncomfortable, questions that didn't have easy answers. And when she tried to speak, her words sometimes came out slow or broken. She stuttered when she was nervous, which only made things worse. Her parents didn't really understand her. When she spoke up with new ideas or opinions, they would quickly wave her off. "Not now, Amai," her mother would say. "That's silly," her father would add. Over time, she stopped trying. At dinner, her siblings talked and laughed while Amai listened. At family events, people would forget to include her in photos. If someone asked, "Where's Amai?" the answer was often, "Oh, she's around somewhere." She was like a shadow in her own house, always there, but hardly seen. At school, it wasn't much better. Teachers noticed her for being quiet, but not much else. She did well in her studies, but nobody clapped for her the way they clapped for her brother's football wins or her sister's singing awards. At home, trophies from her siblings decorated the shelves, while her quiet success stayed in notebooks tucked under her bed. Even during birthdays, Amai's presence felt like a small detail. Her cake was always smaller, her gifts more practical. Her parents never meant to hurt her, but their words and actions spoke loudly. They praised the loud ones, the popular ones, the shining stars. And Amai, she faded more into the background every year. She learned how to move without being seen, how to be helpful but unnoticed, how to smile when her heart was tired. But she kept going, quietly. She watched, she listened, she learned. In silence, she was growing in ways they couldn't see. Deep inside, a strong light was forming, one that didn't need permission to shine. She was the invisible daughter, but not for long. One day they would all turn around, and this time they wouldn't be able to ignore her. Amai was working quietly at a small tech cafe in town. It wasn't fancy, just a place with slow fans, old computers, and wires hanging from the walls. But to Amai, it was a safe space. She didn't mind the dust or the noise. She came every day, using the cafe's computer to practice her skills and take small online jobs. Most people didn't notice her. She kept to herself, just like always. One evening, as the sun was setting and only a few people were left in the cafe, two women walked in. They were dressed simply, but looked stressed. They sat down near Amai and opened their laptops. talking in low, worried voices. Amai didn't mean to listen, but their voices were loud enough. They were talking about a business idea they had started, a mobile app to help small vendors sell their goods online. But the app wasn't working. It kept crashing, and the developer they hired had disappeared with their money. Amai's ears perked up. She had seen this kind of problem before. She turned slightly, pretending not to hear, but her brain had already started thinking of solutions. She looked at their screen from the corner of her eye. A few moments later, she stood up, walked over slowly, and said in the softest voice, "Sorry, I think I can help." The women looked at her, surprised. One of them smiled politely, but the other rolled her eyes. "It's okay. We've had professionals work on it," she said. Amai nodded, but didn't walk away. "If I break it more, you don't have to pay," she added quietly. They hesitated, then moved aside and let her sit. Amai's fingers moved fast. She opened the code, fixed the bugs, rearranged the design, and tested the app. In less than 20 minutes, it was running better than ever. The women stared at the screen, shocked. "How did you?" one whispered. Amai just smiled. "It wasn't broken, just misunderstood." They couldn't believe what they had seen. A quiet girl from a dusty cafe had solved a problem 3 professionals couldn't. They asked her name, her story, what else she could do. That night, they didn't just thank her, they asked her to work with them. It wasn't a big offer. It didn't come with a contract or a paycheck right away, but it was the first time someone saw her, not as a shadow, but as someone valuable. Amai walked home under the night sky, her heart beating fast, not from fear, but from hope. That one small moment, that one chance to help, had opened a door she didn't even know existed, and for the first time in her life, Amai didn't feel invisible. She felt seen. She felt ready. After that night at the cafe, Amai didn't wait for anyone to clap for her. She didn't expect praise or promises. She just got to work. Every day, she would wake up early and head to the tech cafe. She couldn't afford her own computer yet, so she used the cafe's slow ones. At night, she stayed in a small shared room with 3 other girls who were also chasing dreams of their own. The space was tiny, and she often had to sleep with noise all around her. But Amai never complained. She made a quiet corner for herself in every loud place. She ate simple meals, mostly noodles, sometimes bread and tea, while others partied or posted pictures of their lives. Amai was writing code, learning new tools, and fixing problems no one else noticed. At first, she took small jobs from people online, fixing websites, designing buttons, cleaning up messy apps. It didn't pay much, but it helped her survive. Then, slowly, things started to grow. She noticed that many small shop owners, especially women in local market, were struggling to keep up with modern business tools. They had good products, but no easy way to reach more people. Amai began building a simple platform to help them sell online, manage orders, and grow without needing to understand complicated tech. She named it Routt. It wasn't a flashy name, but it had meaning. When an investor finally asked her why she chose that name, Amai looked up and said softly, "Because I was always unheard. I was always the echo in the room. And now, I want to help others like me, people who are rooted in truth but ignored by noise." The investor paused, touched by her words. For 4 years, Amai worked on Routt without fame, without followers, without recognition. No one clapped when she pulled her first all-nighter. No one noticed when she skipped meals to pay for internet data. But she kept going, one step at a time, fixing bugs, improving the design, helping vendors sign up, and answering every message herself. The platform started spreading, slowly at first, then faster. People began talking about it in small markets, then in big cities. She still didn't show her face much. She wasn't chasing likes or loud attention. She just wanted to create something that worked, something that made real people's lives better. Amai didn't need applause. She needed silence. The quiet gave her space to build. The stillness helped her hear the things others ignored. While the world looked the other way, she was creating something strong, something lasting. And deep down, she knew her time would come, not for fame, but for impact. 5 years had passed since that night in the cafe, the night Amai quietly fixed an app and opened a door to a whole new life. She had changed a lot since then, but she stayed the same in one way. She still didn't chase noise. She worked hard, stayed humble, and focused on helping others grow through her platform, Routt. It had now helped thousands of small vendors, especially women in local markets, and was quietly becoming known across the country. But still, Amai kept a low profile. She never told her family much. They didn't ask either. Then one day her phone buzzed. It was a message from her mother. A party invitation. Another celebration. This time, it wasn't just an anniversary. A famous politician's son was visiting their town, and Amai's parents wanted the whole family to attend. They made it sound like a big deal. Her siblings were already excited. Her sister had posted a video in a new dress. Her brother had shown off a new watch online. The usual. Amai didn't say much. She simply replied, "I'll come." On the day of the party, the house was filled with lights, loud music, and laughter. Her siblings arrived one by one in flashy branded cars, with their phones out, taking selfies and showing off for guests. People clapped for them, hugged them, took pictures, and then Amai walked in. She came alone. No car, no noise, no crowd around her. She wore a plain brown dress, no makeup, no gold, no designer tags. Just her, calm, quiet, and graceful. She didn't look like someone trying to prove anything. She looked like someone at peace. At first, no one recognized her. Some of her parents' friends even looked past her like she was a stranger. Her mother glanced at her briefly, then went back to entertaining the important guests. Her father didn't greet her. Even her siblings gave her the usual half-hearted nods, too busy talking about themselves. But Amai didn't mind. She didn't come for attention. She moved through the party gently, greeting elders, smiling at children, and taking a seat near the back. She wasn't shining loudly, but her peace made her stand out. As the night went on, more people arrived. Laughter filled the air, and phones kept clicking. But Amai sat quietly, sipping water, her eyes calm. No one asked who she was. No one saw her for what she had become. But all of that was about to change. Amai didn't need to speak up. Her moment was coming, not with noise, but with truth. Not with filters, but with facts. And when it arrived, no one at that party would forget it. About an hour into the party, the noise had grown louder. Laughter filled the air, and music played as more important guests arrived. Amai quietly stayed seated, watching everyone enjoy themselves. She didn't expect anyone to come up to her or ask how she was doing. She'd grown used to being the one no one noticed. Then her mother came over. She didn't smile or ask how Amai was. Instead, she leaned down and whispered, "Can you please help the caterers in the kitchen? We need more hands there. That's where you'll be useful." Amai looked up at her mother for a second. She didn't feel surprised. This wasn't new. Her mother always gave her the smallest roles, the quietest jobs, the kind where no one would see her. But Amai didn't argue. She simply nodded, stood up, and walked toward the kitchen. Inside, the caterers were busy, sweating and rushing to keep the food flowing. Amai rolled up her sleeves and joined them, helping carry plates, wipe trays, and refill drinks. Some of the caterers looked surprised to see someone like her helping out. But Amai worked without saying much. She didn't mind. She had faced far worse than this kind of quiet rejection. As she stepped out of the kitchen carrying a tray of small chops, a woman at the far end of the room froze. She was well dressed, talking to another guest. But as soon as her eyes landed on Amai, her face changed. She stared for a second, then walked quickly toward her. "Wait, aren't you the face behind Routt?" she asked, eyes wide. The tray in Amai's hand shook a little. She hadn't expected to be recognized, especially not here. She nodded slowly, unsure of what would come next. The woman gasped. "I watched your interview on African Business Weekly. You're Amai. You built that platform helping small vendors, right?" A few nearby guests turned to look. Someone whispered, "Routt." Another person pulled out their phone. Amai gave a small smile and said quietly, "Yes, that's me." The woman beamed. "I've been trying to contact your team. Your work is brilliant. You're the reason my aunt's business survived lockdown." More people began to notice. Heads turned. Phones came up. Whispers spread across the hall. But Amai stood calmly, still holding the tray, still dressed in the same simple brown dress, and still as graceful as ever. And in that moment, all the years of being unseen faded. She wasn't just someone's daughter now. She was someone the world had started to recognize. Not because she shouted for attention, but because her work spoke for her. The noise in the hall grew louder as the special guest finally arrived. He was a foreign delegate from a global development group, well known and respected. People rushed to greet him. Everyone wanted a selfie, a handshake, a few seconds of his attention. Amai had quietly stepped aside, still holding the empty tray from earlier, ready to return to the kitchen. She didn't expect anything. She didn't want attention. She had gotten used to moving in and out of rooms like a shadow. But then, something unexpected happened. The guest of honor looked around the hall, smiling politely at the crowd around him. But his eyes suddenly stopped, locking onto Amai. He took a few steps in her direction, then started walking straight toward her. The crowd turned to look. Everyone wondered who he was going to greet. He stopped in front of her and reached out his hand. "You," he said warmly, shaking her hand. "You're the genius behind the poverty tech solution, right?" Amai blinked, a little unsure how to respond. She gave a quiet nod. "I watched your speech at TED Global," he continued, raising his voice just enough so others could hear. "You're changing lives across the continent with Routt. I've been waiting to meet you." The room fell silent. You could hear the music fade as people turned their heads. A few phones dropped. Conversations stopped. Someone whispered, "What did he just say?" Others just stared. The woman who had recognized Amai earlier gasped again. Cameras turned. Phones pointed in her direction. Her siblings looked stunned, frozen in place. Her father's smile faded. Her mother, standing near the drink table, dropped her glass. It hit the floor with a soft crash, but no one noticed. All eyes were on Amai. The delegate wasn't finished. He turned to the crowd and added, "You all are lucky to have someone like her among you. Do you know how many countries are studying her model? Her app has reached thousands of struggling vendors. She's not just smart, she's brilliant." People started clapping slowly, then louder. A few walked over to take photos. Some guests began asking questions, wanting to know more. Amai stood calmly in the middle of it all, her heart steady. She hadn't come to be noticed. She had come because she was invited. And yet, here she was, being seen, being celebrated, not for her looks or loud words, but for her work. And for the first time in her life, in the very house where she had once been invisible, all the lights had turned toward her. The room was still, the kind of silence that feels heavy. All eyes were on Amai, and no one knew what to say. For a moment, her parents just stood there frozen. Her father let out a shaky laugh, trying to act like he wasn't surprised. "Yes, that's our daughter," he said softly, but even his voice didn't sound sure. Her siblings, who had been busy showing off all evening, suddenly looked uncomfortable. They slowly moved closer to Amai, as if being near her would make people believe they had always supported her. But it was too late. People had heard the truth. They had seen the way Amai was treated, the way she had been sent to the kitchen like a helper just an hour ago. The foreign delegate, still smiling at Amai, turned back to the crowd. "Do you know she was featured on Forbes 30 Under 30? He said clearly, his voice full of pride. "She's solving real problems in places your government hasn't even touched. Routt is being studied in universities now. This young woman right here is not just a success. She's a quiet revolution." A wave of murmurs moved through the guests. People began whispering to each other, surprised, shocked, even ashamed. One woman leaned toward her friend and said in a low voice, "And her parents called her embarrassing." The words hung in the air like a truth that couldn't be erased. Amai stood still, her face calm, but her heart was racing. Not because of the attention, but because this was the moment she had never imagined. The moment when all the quiet years, all the rejection, and all the pain were now shining like a light that couldn't be ignored. The people who once saw her as nothing now saw her as everything they wished they could understand. Her mother looked around nervously, watching as guests started to ask questions about Routt, about Amai's journey, about how they had never known any of this. But it wasn't Amai who changed. She had always been this girl. It was just that no one ever took the time to see her. Amai didn't speak much. She didn't remind anyone of the things they used to say. She didn't tell them about the nights she cried alone, or the days she almost gave up. She simply stood in her truth. No anger, no pride, just peace. And now, in the very house where she was once invisible, they finally saw her. Not as the awkward one, not as the disappointment, but as the daughter they never truly knew. Amai stood quietly as people surrounded her. Some wanted pictures. Others just wanted to shake her hand. They asked questions about Routt, about how she started, about what inspired her. She answered gently, without showing off. Her voice was calm, her smile soft, but inside, she felt something deep, like her heart was finally being seen after years of being ignored. She didn't speak to her parents much, not because she was angry, but because there was nothing left to say. They stood near the gate, watching everything from a distance. Her father kept adjusting his tie, trying to act like he was proud. Her mother held her handbag tightly, her eyes following Amai's every move, full of shock, confusion, and maybe even regret. But Amai didn't look their way. She wasn't doing any of this for them. As the night went on, the room felt tighter. More people wanted her attention. More eyes followed her. Amai felt the air grow heavy, so she quietly stepped outside for some air. But even then, cameras followed her. A few reporters had arrived. A popular news blog had posted about her in real time. Her story was already trending online, yet she didn't feel excited or loud. She just felt free. She stood under the sky, breathing slowly. The stars above were quiet and the night air was cool against her skin. For a moment, she thought about all the family dinners where she sat quietly, ignored, all the parties where she stood in corners, all the moments when no one listened to her ideas, when her own name felt like a burden. And now, here she was, not begging to be included, not trying to prove anything, just standing tall in the light she built for herself. Her parents were still at the gate, watching, silent, maybe remembering all the times they called her awkward, all the times they introduced her with a sigh. They had offered chairs to everyone else, praised her siblings, showed off their awards, but never Amai. They never saved her a seat at the table, never gave her space to grow, never thought she would be the one people clapped for. But Amai didn't need their seat. She didn't need their table. She had built her own stage, one where others like her could rise too, one where silence wasn't a weakness and kindness wasn't forgotten. She didn't turn around. She didn't wave. She simply walked forward, followed by the world, while the ones who once looked past her now stood in the shadows, watching the daughter they never truly saw shine without their help. Months had passed since that night, but Amai's name had only grown louder. Her story was now everywhere, in newspapers, on websites, and even in classrooms. A major news channel ran a full documentary about her journey. From Invisible to Indispensable, the title read. Kids in schools learned about Routt and how it helped small villages grow food in dry lands. People across the world now saw Amai not just as a smart woman, but as a quiet force of change. At a big family gathering, long after the spotlight had begun to shine on Amai, the whispers started again. But this time, they weren't about how weird she was. Now, relatives spoke with pride, saying, "She's our blood," or "I always knew she was special." Even those who used to mock her shyness now said it was graceful. Everyone wanted a piece of her light. Her mother sat in a wide hallway, surrounded by women who had once watched her roll her eyes at Amai's silence. She opened her phone and showed a picture. Amai, smiling in a suit, standing beside global leaders. Her mother's voice was softer than usual. "She's my daughter," she said with a small, hopeful smile as if waiting to be praised. But the woman next to her didn't smile. She turned to Amai's mother slowly, her eyes calm but sharp. And then she asked, in the most honest tone, "Then why were you ashamed of her?" The question didn't come with anger, just truth. Amai's mother froze, her fingers still holding the phone. For a second, she couldn't speak. She blinked a few times, trying to form a reply, but no words came out. The hallway around them felt quieter now. Some heads turned, others pretended not to hear. The question echoed louder than any praise ever could, because everyone knew the truth. For years, Amai had been called too quiet, too strange, not like the others. Her mother had often introduced her with a laugh or brushed her off when she spoke. She never brought Amai forward like she did with her other children, never defended her, never saw her as enough, not until the world did. Now she wanted to be proud, but the past still followed her. In that moment, Amai wasn't even in the hallway. She didn't need to be. Her story had become bigger than a room full of relatives, bigger than the shame they once fed her. And even as the woman turned away, and Amai's mother quietly locked her phone, the question lingered, not just for her, but for every parent, every aunt, every uncle who ever called a child too different. Then why were you ashamed of her? Sometimes, that one question says everything. To every girl who was told to sit down, shut up, or stay out of sight, let them laugh now. One day, they'll be Googling your name while you sign the checks they'll never earn. Tag a quiet soul who's building something louder than applause.